Hello everyone, buongiorno. That's the extent of my Italian, unfortunately. But welcome to this session on entrepreneurial journalism. My name is Adam Westbrook. I'm a British journalist based in London. Thank you very much all for coming to this session today on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. There is translation available for those of you who would like it. My one problem I have is that I speak too quickly. So as a warning to the translator in the back of the room, I'll do my best to speak slowly. But if I get ahead of myself, then just let me know, and I'll do my best to slow down. So as I say, thank you very much for coming. This session on entrepreneurial journalism, it's sort of an introduction, if you like, to what entrepreneurial journalism is and how it can be done. A look at some of the people who are doing it successfully. I have to say, I'm very impressed, actually, looking through the events that have already been hosted here at the International Journalism Festival so far. There is I'm very impressed by the entrepreneurial theme. There are lots of, there have been several very interesting talks so far, looking at startups, looking at new ways of doing journalism, and I think that's a really positive change from the last few years to see that entrepreneurship and journalism is being, and the partnership between the two is kind of being taken a bit more seriously. I've been invited here today to speak to you by Media 140, who are a really interesting and fantastic organisation, really looking at how journalism can be done better and differently in the digital age. You can find out more about them at media140.com. And if any of you are tweeting today's event, as well as the IJF12 hashtag, you can also use the Media140 hashtag as well. So, to start off today, it's not so much a straight presentation, it's also a workshop. So there'll be a chance for you guys to get involved as well. And I'd actually like to start today by asking you all to get a piece of paper, if you have one, just a sheet of paper, and a pen. If you could just get one out of your bag, maybe use the back of you can use the back of the brochure for the festival, whatever you like. And what I would like you to do is to answer, I'm going to give you one question, a really interesting and powerful question that kind of starts a lot of entrepreneurs on their journey, if you like. And I'd like you just to spend maybe just 2 minutes just thinking about the answer and then writing it down on the piece of paper. So the question I'd like to ask you guys to start us off is this. What would you do if you knew that you couldn't fail? Okay, so we're thinking specifically about your careers and your work as journalists. What would you do as a journalist right now if you knew that it wouldn't go wrong? What's the most amazing, exciting, ambitious project that you would do, the story you would tell, the thing you would make right now if you knew there were no hurdles, if you knew it would work? Okay, it's an interesting question. It takes a little bit of time to think about. Also, when you're thinking of the answer, don't think about saying, I would like to be the editor of the New York Times, for example, because for that to happen, it kind of relies on the New York Times existing into the future, which we hope it does, but we don't know. So don't tie your kind of big idea down to an organisation. Think about something independent that you would love to do if you just knew right now you could make it work. So maybe there's a book you'd like to write, maybe there's a story, maybe there's a documentary about climate change that you've always wanted to make. You go and do that. A book you'd like to publish, a story you just really think needs to be told, maybe even a magazine you'd start or something like that. Okay, so just take a minute to think about it. And one promise is I'm not going to ask you to share it with anyone. You're not going to have to read it out loud or pass it to the person next to you. This is just for you, between you and yourself. So be really honest as well when you answer this question and really think about the biggest, most exciting thing that you could imagine doing. And I'll give you guys just 1 minute to do that. And it does help to write it down as well, because it makes it firm and tangible. Okay, so once you've written that, if you just take the piece of paper, you can just fold it up and just put it in your pocket for now. As I say, I won't ask you to share it with anybody. But it's a powerful question, isn't it? What would you do if you knew that you couldn't fail? And it brings up one of the big themes of entrepreneurship as well, which is failure and that kind of fear of starting something that fails. So I'll start off today just by introducing myself a bit more. As I say, my name's Adam Westbrook. I'm an independent multimedia producer, digital journalist based in London. There's my Twitter and web address. I also write a blog about the future of news, new ways of doing journalism, and I'm very interested in entrepreneurial journalism and new business models as well. And actually, in the last week, I did something entrepreneurial. I committed an act of entrepreneurship, you might say. What I did was on Thursday this week, I published a book, a digital book. Here's the front cover. It's called Inside the Story, and it's a masterclass in digital storytelling from the people who did it best. And so basically what it is, it's an ebook, and I've asked some of the best filmmakers and storytellers and sort of producers from around the world, and I've asked them each to write a page in this book about how you tell really good stories on the web, and what does it take. So I brought that all together and I put it into a book, uploaded the book, and then put it on sale for about €5 a copy. And that was on Thursday morning. And in the first 48 hours, it has made about just over €1,000 in the first 2 days since going on sale. Now, the bad news for me is that I don't get any of that money because I'm selling the book to raise money for Kiva, who are a charity who works help people set up businesses in the developing world. So it was a fundraising thing, but it was still it had all the hallmarks of an entrepreneurial project. So it was about identifying a problem that people have, identifying a need, so realizing that there are people out there who want to make really amazing films on the web, but they don't know how. They know the basics, but they don't know what it takes to really tell a good story. And then basically creating a product that basically solves that problem, that helps people and has value for them. Packaging it into a product and then putting that on sale. And that's actually the whole essence of what entrepreneurship is. And I'm really interested in how we as journalists can take those principles and apply them to what we do. So I'm here to talk to you guys today about entrepreneurial journalism, but not in the way you might think. So this isn't a talk about business models and cash flow analyses and sort of how to set up a massive multinational corporation. That works for some people, but I'm actually interested in a different type of entrepreneurship, one that's becoming much more popular and much more kind of realistic, especially for content creators and journalists like yourselves. But before we start, I want to begin with a lesson from history. Just to sort of set up the context, I guess, of why entrepreneurial journalism matters. I take it you've all heard of Instagram. Everyone's familiar with Instagram, right? Brilliant app, really fun to use. I've been Instagramming everything in Perugia. Perugia's perfect for Instagram. Really nice place to take pictures. But you guys will also know that Instagram was bought by Facebook a few weeks ago for $1 billion. Is it worth $1 billion? Probably not, no. But that's not really the point. It's certainly a good app, and it's using photography and rejuvenating, I guess, an interest in photography by making it social. But the reason it's interesting, the reason Instagram is interesting, is because only about 6 months before Instagram was bought for $1 billion, Kodak went bankrupt. So everyone remembers Kodak, the big leaders in photography in the 20th century. I love this advert. This is great. The same year that Instagram is worth $1 billion, Kodak is worth nothing. And you have to ask, the big question you have to ask about this is that Kodak could have started Instagram. 5 years ago, Kodak were in the perfect place to start Instagram. They had the money then, they had the resources, they had the brand and the company name and the following among photography enthusiasts. They could have created Instagram. But they didn't. They said, we make cameras. We're a photography company. We don't do apps and phones. No, we're going to stick to our cameras. And because of that, they're now worth nothing. And it's something that's been repeated lots of times, including in the mainstream media as well. For example, I think, you can look at Blockbuster, the video store. Do you guys have Blockbuster in Italy? I don't know if you have an equivalent. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, Blockbuster was huge. It was the place you went to go and rent videos. They could have started Netflix or a love film or a streaming service, but they didn't. And now they're fast becoming redundant because of products like Netflix, which are attuned to the digital age. And again, Blockbuster had all the resources to do that. And again, in our field too of journalism, this happened as well. Craigslist and Gumtree were the two big services that have really done financial damage to newspapers because they stole the revenue, the income from classified ads. The interesting thing is the guy who founded Craigslist lives in San Francisco, and his apartment apparently is a short walk away from what was the biggest newspaper, the office of the biggest newspaper in San Francisco. So there was a chance for the people at that newspaper to go to Craig and say, do you want to work for us? Do you want to do Craigslist on our website? Can we buy it off you? Or they could have just started their own one, but they didn't. And now they're in big trouble as well. You could also argue that 10 years ago, the New York Times had enough money to buy Google because it would only have been worth about $1 million. But they said, no, why do we want to buy a search engine? We're a newspaper. And if they had bought Google, they'd now be the richest newspaper in the world. They could open up bureaus in every town, in every country, and we wouldn't be asking these questions about the future of journalism. So the reason I have told these stories is because this has kind of been the problem of these big organizations in adapting to the digital age, I guess, and the changes that have happened in journalism. And what it's created is a mathematical problem, if you like, for us as journalists. And it's this one. The number of jobs in journalism is doing this, and at the same time, the number of people who want to get into journalism is going the other way. It's going up. So there are more people wanting to be journalists than there are jobs for them in journalism. And this is why entrepreneurship is a really exciting opportunity for us now. Because in this instance, what it gives us as in starting your own business is control, direction over your career. There is this idea that a job is secure, that there is security in having a full-time job. But, ask anyone who's been affected by the recession, anyone who's been laid off by a newspaper, and they would disagree. With entrepreneurship, if your idea doesn't work out, you only have yourself to blame, but you're the person that can fix it as well. So you are still in complete control. Here's another question that comes up a lot as well. Is freelancing entrepreneurial journalism? A lot of times when I talk about entrepreneurial journalism, there's usually a freelancer in the audience who puts their hand up and says, well, hang on, I'm a freelance journalist, I've been doing it for years, I'm already an entrepreneurial journalist. And they might be right, but I think that actually freelancing isn't really entrepreneurial journalism. They're not quite the same thing. And that's because freelancing often, especially if you're doing shift work, if you're going and working, 9 till 5, doing a shift for a newspaper or a radio station, what you're doing is selling your time. And it's often the same if you're, working on commissions, writing articles as a freelancer. In some ways, what you're doing is selling your time. Entrepreneurship is different. It's about actually selling either a product or a service, as we'll go on to, and it's distinct, separate from you. So you're no longer selling your time, you're selling something else. And that means that actually you can make more money as well. So, the exciting thing about where we are now, although we have this problem of jobs going down and the number of people in the industry going up, we're actually in a very exciting time, as I'm sure you guys have realised, with great potential. And I like to call it the age of the online publisher. That's where I think we are now. The age of the online publisher. So this, basically, if you work in content creation and publishing, it is now a fantastic time to be in this area and doing this sort of work. And I'll explain why. Here, I'm going to give you 5 facts that I think are true about the age of the online publisher. So the first one is this one. Creating content is now easier, faster, and cheaper than it ever has been in history. So creating content is easier, faster, and cheaper than it ever has been. 10 years ago, if you wanted to make a film, or 15 years ago, if you wanted to make a film, you'd need a camera that cost about 10,000 euros. And then you'd need an edit suite that also cost about 10,000 euros. And you'd need a crew and a sound person. And you'd need to get insurance, and you'd need to do all this sort of thing for them. Today, if you want to make a film, you just need a little flip cam, for example, which is about 100 euros, or even one of these. These can now, iPhones and smartphones, obviously can now shoot really high-quality video. And even if to shoot really amazing video, you can buy one of the Canon SLR cameras that are really popular in online video at the moment. They're still incredibly affordable, only about 1,000 euros, which is a big reduction on what video cost before. It's the same with photography. It's the same with books. If you wanted to publish a book 10 years ago, you needed to find an agent and a publisher, and you needed to spend a long time. You needed to get, an advance. You need to get money in advance to do it. It's the same with podcasts or, doing radio. That's all become a lot cheaper. So now it's almost free now to create content. All you need is the idea, a small amount of equipment, and you can go and become a content creator. And this is really important. The second truth, is that publishing this content, again, is easier, faster, and cheaper than it ever has been in history. Again, if you got as far as making a film, you'd need to find a TV station who was going to broadcast it, or a cinema distributor who would get your film into cinemas. Very expensive. If you made radio, you needed to have access to a radio station to broadcast it. Photography, books, all those sort of things, again, very expensive to produce, big overheads, so not many people could do them. Today, there's none of that. So you get a website, you can get your own web space for about 60 to 100 euros a year. You can buy a web domain for less than 10 euros. You can set up a website in half an hour, really, if you are familiar with WordPress or any of the blogging platforms. You can become a content publisher very quickly and without spending hardly any money. The third thing is that once you've created and published this content, building an audience around it, building a community of readers, of followers, again, easier, faster, and cheaper than it ever has been at the same time. So social media allows us, obviously, to to share our content. Facebook is incredibly viral. So now you don't need to spend any money on marketing, for example. In fact, someone, I don't know who it is, but someone predicted a few months ago, or a few years ago, that in the near future, advertising would be like sex, in that only losers pay for it. And I think we're kind of almost there now already. You can now market stuff for free. You don't need sort of to pay people to advertise your product for you. Number 4, starting a business is easier, faster, cheaper. Again, if you want to sell something, you don't need a shop, you need a website. If you want to offer a service, you don't need business cards, you just need a website. Again, which are much cheaper, much more affordable than they ever have been before. And then there's finally this one, which I mentioned earlier on, that having a job now is riskier. The risk is greater in having a job in some ways than being an entrepreneur and starting your own business. I think there's still this perception that getting a job is the safe thing to do, it's the sensible thing to do. But as I said, the recession has proven that actually job security doesn't really mean that much at all. So because of these 5 things now, we're in a world where creating content, publishing it, and then making money from it is easier and less risky than it ever has been. So what is entrepreneurship then? For those who haven't done it before, what actually sort of defines a business? I think it's very simple. There are 3 parts to it, okay, if you're going to become entrepreneurial. Firstly, you have to create a product or a service, okay, and it's always divided into one of those 2 things. You either make a product that you sell, like a magazine or an app or training or something like that, or you provide a service. So whether you are making films on commission or working as a photojournalist or something like that. The second thing is that it has to be something that people are willing to pay for. You know, I like watching movies, but no one is going to pay me to watch movies, basically. So you have to choose the things, you have to choose what you do and package it in a way into something that people will pay for. Okay, you have to know there's a demand for your product or your service. That's very important. And the third thing you need is then an actual way to make money from it. You then need a way to turn what your product or service into something that brings in money. Okay, so you need a way to collect money, whether that's a PayPal account. You need an actual pricing structure. You need to have a value to what you're selling. So these are the kind of 3 main things. That's all it actually is, really. You don't need much more than that. People will talk to you about business plans, that 10-page business plans, and having a kind of mission statement. You don't need any of that. You just need to satisfy these 3 things. So you need to have a product or a service that you're selling that fills a need, that supplies a demand, and then have some way to get money from the people who buy from you. Here's another really good way to look at it, this idea of convergence. And basically what it says is that the great business model kind of lies between these 2 circles. If you're going to be entrepreneurial and start a business, it really needs to be about something that you're really passionate about. It has to be about something that you really love doing. There's lots of money to be made now in things like SEO or, kind of creating viral content for the web. And I could try and do that, but that really bores me. So why would I try and do that? Entrepreneurship requires a lot of passion. It requires a lot of commitment and a lot of energy. So it really helps if what you do is based around something that you really love. Whether it's a type of journalism, maybe a media, so maybe you love video, or you love photography, or you love audio, or web design, or maybe it's about a particular issue. Maybe you're really passionate about the environment or about sport. Okay, it has to really tie into one of your passions. But also at the same time, it has to be something that the world actually needs or wants. As I say, I like films and watching films, but no one wants me to watch films. No one cares that I like films. So that's kind of a no-brainer, I like Chinese food, but no one's going to pay me to eat Chinese food, okay, because no one wants that, okay? So you have to find this kind of sweet spot between what you love and then what the world wants. And sometimes it's about packaging your passion into a business model. And there are lots of people who do that. But there's no escaping one fact, and that is that whatever your business does, it has to help people. You have to start from that point about what is it that I'm good at as a journalist, about what I know about, and what I'm passionate about, and what I'm good at. How does that help people? How can I wake up in the morning and actually help another human being? So the book I told you about at the start, Inside the Story, that kind of works because it's based entirely on helping other people. I started making the book because I knew that people needed help telling better stories. So it was all about helping other people and adding value to them. And lots of businesses don't work because actually they're just not quite sure how they help people, or they're not trying to help someone. Last year I started work on a business idea to start a magazine, a digital magazine, that was a bit like This American Life, but in video. So it told really nice stories about interesting people. It's a lovely idea, and maybe it would have been a really beautiful magazine, but actually that doesn't help anyone. No one needs interesting, quirky stories about interesting people. You know, it doesn't add value to other people, so it never really would have worked. And This American Life in America has to ask people to donate money to actually kind of survive. So you have to help someone. That's the difficult bit, is kind of looking at what you do as a journalist and what you love to do and what you're good at, and applying that to other people. So what do I have that other people really need? And it's funny when you ask this question, you actually start to think about journalism in a different way, because you have to sort of ask, does journalism actually help people? What actually do we have that other people don't? And I think, the businesses that have survived in this new age are ones that have access to things that the average person doesn't. So, sport magazines, for example, have access to football managers and the press conferences. Like, the average person can't go to those. So that's a value, isn't it? Business news, has access to the markets and has the analysis and that sort of thing. So those sort of types of journalism that are based on having access to something that other people don't, always do sort of survive very well. So, I'm going to show you some businesses then that people have started that are sort of making it work, and just tell you a bit more about them. So this one is a magazine called In Tree Houses, and it's founded by this guy in the corner here. He's called Tom Chambers, and basically he works from home. He set up this business, and what he does is he publishes a quarterly magazine. I think it's one every 5 weeks, I think he does. And basically it's a magazine about, it's actually about business, in fact, and about entrepreneurship. And it's aimed at people who kind of want to set up a business like him. And so he publishes a sort of 30-page PDF file, which costs nothing to make, remember that. He puts it online. And actually, this magazine, this particular one, he gives away for free to build an audience around it. But then he's followed that up with a second one, which is published every month, and you pay an annual subscription. So you pay $97 a year to get all of these magazines delivered to your inbox. So it works out at about $6 or $7 per copy, which isn't too much. And he also then supplements that with consulting work and things like that, so people can pay him as a consultant to find out how to become a publisher like him. So that adds an extra kind of revenue stream. So the interesting thing about him is the subscription model, but then also having more than one way to make money, which is why I think he's quite interesting. And he's set up what he calls a micro publisher. So he's a one-man publishing company. And I think the company is called Mountain and Pacific, if you want to Google it. And he does this all himself. He does it all from home. And so all the kind of money goes direct to him. Here's another one you guys might have heard of. It's called What I Wore And it's founded by this woman at the top here called Poppy Dinsey. she's quite well known in England because basically this all started for her about 2 years ago. She decided to start a blog where basically every day she would take a picture of herself in the mirror like this, showing what she wore, what she was wearing that day. That's all it was. That's all she'd do. Every day she'd just take a picture of herself and then put it on the internet. And somehow this it's a bit of a lame idea, but somehow it really took off and had thousands and thousands of followers, lots of people really interested to know in her taste in fashion and what clothes she was wearing. And it didn't take long for her to then to convert that into a successful career as a fashion journalist. So she gets invited to all the fashion shows. She writes articles in magazines about fashion. She's kind of considered a thought leader, if you like, in fashion journalism. And so that's one of the interesting things about her, is that rather than just becoming a freelance journalist, she's established herself as what we call a thought leader, someone who's leading the direction of where style or fashion goes. So coming up with new ideas, trying new projects, being kind of considered an expert in that kind of field. And the second interesting thing about her is that she's then taken that website and she's created a social network, a niche social network around fashion. So now all these other people are now logging on, creating accounts and taking pictures of them and what clothes they were wearing today and uploading that. So it's sort of a Facebook for fashion, if you like. And obviously fashion is a very interesting market because there's lots of good advertising opportunities, there's lots of good sponsorship opportunities, lots of things to sell people. So it's a very kind of lucrative kind of area. So she's established herself as a prominent publisher in fashion. And actually, her idea has been stolen by another magazine in the UK. A magazine called Look magazine have started their own thing called Look What I Wore Today. They kind of just shamelessly ripped off the idea, if you like. So that's quite an interesting one from that point of view as well. Here's the third one. You guys might have seen this guy before. Have any of you watched the series Everything is a Remix before? It's a 4-part documentary that was produced entirely by this guy up here. He's called Kirby Ferguson. And he wanted to make a documentary about how the internet has changed copyright and sharing, how we share and borrow from each other. And he was trying to make the point that although people get cross about copyright, there's no such thing as an original idea. So he showed how every film kind of borrows something from another film and how every song kind of samples another song. And that nothing is original and that everything is a remix, is basically what it is. So Kirby did this series, 4-part series, and he made it really high quality. This is the secret, I think, to his success, is he put a lot of time and effort into creating a really beautiful documentary. So the graphics are very good, it's really nicely written, it's got really interesting kind of explanations, and it's packaged together really nicely. He put it on the internet, on Vimeo, completely for free. He's never charged any money to watch it. But it's done really well. It's actually I think it's got hundreds of thousands of views. And so when the last one came out, it was really eagerly anticipated. People were really wanting to see it, to kind of see how the thing came together. And now what he's done is he's used that kind of audience he built to now start another, more ambitious documentary project. And he's used Kickstarter, the fundraising website, crowdfunding website, to raise funds to make another documentary. But the other thing as well, he now does have a business as a documentary maker. He's now considered and respected as a documentary filmmaker. So he also gets commissions. He gets asked to go and speak at events and talk about Everything as a Remix. And that's all because he created this really high-quality product and put it online for free. There's a couple more I'd like to show you as well. This is a new one that's also using Kickstarter as well. Are you guys familiar with Kickstarter? Have you heard of it before? It's a crowdfunding website. Unfortunately, you can only raise money and start a project on it if you're American, if you have an American social security number. And they've been talking about opening it up to to Europe, but we have to wait for that for a while. But okay, so this is Matter. It's a science magazine that 3 respected science journalists have decided to create, basically because they think there's an actual gap in the market for really high-quality science journalism. And they've promised to start a magazine that only publishes 1 or 2 articles every month, but that each article is really high quality. And you can see they put it online. There's nothing actually particularly remarkable about it beyond that. It's just an online magazine about science. But you can see that all they wanted was $50,000. And they've actually raised nearly 3 times as much, $140,000 before they've started. So they're good because they demonstrate that you don't just have to sort of have a business idea. You can also use crowdfunding. People do actually pay for good ideas that they like, that inspire them. And again, it's about the promise of quality. I'm a firm believer that the only way really to survive and to stand out and to make whatever it is you do, to make it work, it's got to be quality. You've really got to invest the time, not necessarily the money, but you've got to invest the time in creating a really polished product. The days of quickly writing articles that are 200 words about, the latest kind of cat video, they actually don't really work as much as they used to. So it's a really good indicator that quality matters. And then finally, here's a more traditional news business that's worth a quick look at. It's from America. It's called MedCity News, and it's a medical news website. So it just covers this very specific area of journalism. Okay, so medical industry, pharmaceuticals, news, and that sort of thing. So this is worth noting for a couple of reasons. One is the fact it has a very narrow, what we call a very narrow vertical. So it's talking to a very specific audience. So that's other people who are interested in the pharmaceutical industry. It's an industry that has lots of money. So there's good potential for advertising and for sponsorship and that sort of thing. And it's also its audience, its customers are other businesses. And there's an interesting idea there that the best customers for whatever your entrepreneurial business are other businesses. That's for a couple of reasons. One is that other businesses can pay you more money. So you can, one individual customer might pay €5 a month. But a business might pay €5,000 a month because they're a business. And also businesses you don't need customer service helplines and annoying things like that if your customers are other businesses. But MedCity are also interesting because they have lots of different revenue streams. So they make money in lots of different ways. They actually act as a news wire, if you like, for medical news. So other organisations, other newspapers and publishers pay them a subscription to receive their medical news. They also, as you can see, have advertising on the website. And they also run events as well and host events and do that sort of thing. So there's a whole range of different ways of making money, not all of them directly connected with publishing information, but it's about making money from the community, the audience that you build from your particular product. Okay. Here's the interesting thing about 3 of these people that we've just met. So there's Kirby Ferguson, the filmmaker, there's Poppy Dinsey, the fashion journalist, and then there's Tom, who is the publisher. None of these people have any qualifications in journalism. None of them are trained as journalists. None of them have worked on any journalism, particularly before they started what they do. They've all come from different fields. And that's a really interesting thing that we as journalists need to maybe ask some difficult questions about. How come these people who aren't actually journalists, how are they doing so well in journalism when actual journalists are sort of struggling in some ways as well? So it's proof that that actually it's almost not the qualification that matters. It's about having the mindset to create a product or a service and to kind of get it out there and to see those opportunities and demands in the market. So it's in a way, it could be a worrying trend that, journalism is now being done by non-journalists. And maybe that's something that we, as an industry, need to ask some kind of questions about. So is entrepreneurship at odds with journalism? I don't think it is. I think lots of journalists are uncomfortable about asking questions about money. But what we're seeing now is actually now newspapers are trying to be entrepreneurial as well, because they're fast running out of money. And they need to start thinking a bit more creatively about how to monetize their audience. So there's a couple of examples here. On the left-hand side, this is a media company, a newspaper group in Wales, in Britain. And they have now started doing training and consulting. So they train people in PR and marketing how to write better press releases or how to make video and things like that. The second two are both the Guardian newspaper in London, have been trying lots of different entrepreneurial ideas in the last year. The one in the middle is a open weekend, a journalism festival, actually much like this one, where they open their offices up to all their readers. And their readers paid, I can't remember how much it was, maybe about £40 or something for a ticket to come to the Guardian's offices and meet the journalists, come to talks and sessions like this. Take part in workshops. So it's taking their very kind of defined audience and trying to make money out of them. And then there's this other idea that they were actually looking at, which was to open their own hotel, believe it or not. A hotel for Guardian readers, if you can imagine such a thing. They said they're thinking about it. They're also looking at starting their own journalism school as well, the Guardian Journalism School. So you've got a newspaper here that's actually now saying, right, how can we be entrepreneurial? So you've seen some people who've done it. You've seen that it's actually easier and faster and cheaper than it ever has been. And you've seen that actually even the mainstream media is looking at doing it as well. Are you all ready to go out there and start a business? No, of course you're not. Because when you start thinking about it, there's quite a lot of complicated things that start to kind of creep in when it comes to starting a business. For a start, you might think, well, I need some money, I need some investment, some capital if I'm going to start my business. Do I need to borrow some money from the bank, or do I need to take out a loan or get some angel investors to come and invest in my business? That sounds a bit difficult. And then you think, well, if I'm going to start this business, I need like an office. So I'm going to have to rent some office space. I mean, that's expensive and it's difficult to find. And then you've got to find some employees as well. You've got to hire people if you're going to make this business work. And then you've got to think about HR, human resources and hiring and firing and job adverts and, employment law. Like, this is all stuff that none of us got into journalism to deal with, let's be honest. So my advice, in light of that, is to forget about borrowing any money before you start a business. Forget about hiring an office and getting doing all that sort of stuff. And forget about hiring people as well, okay? I'm going to introduce talk about a sort of business that forgets all of those things, and I think is the best way to exploit entrepreneurship and journalism today. And it's this idea of what people are calling the micro business, okay? So to describe a micro business, it's usually one person, often working from home without any office space, finding a way to do what they love and make money from it. Often it's a web-based business. And crucially, they're not making millions of euros and becoming a multi-millionaire. What they're doing is they're making enough money to support the life that they want. Okay, the life that they want to lead. And that's kind of one of the secrets behind it, because, again, this idea of becoming a big multinational company or something with all these other things connected to it is very off-putting, isn't it? It's quite intimidating. There's a lot of things to overcome. But actually, I think there's nothing to be ashamed of about starting an intentionally small business doing what you love that makes enough money to live the life that you want to lead. And I think, people think that they have to make lots of money, and actually you don't. You just have to make enough to live the life you lead. And actually, when you think about it, is that even that much money? To have a comfortable living, to live where you want to live, to have the sort of house you want to have, it probably isn't as much money as you think it is, and certainly not in kind of entrepreneurial terms. So this is kind of what I would call the micro business challenge. This is the way to try and do this. To launch a micro business, okay, that makes enough money to cover your monthly outgoings, whatever they are. You've got to start it for less than €100, and you've got to get it out there as an operating business in less than a month. Okay, that's the micro business challenge. Forget all the other stuff, forget business plans, forget employment law, forget all those kind of things for now. Just start on this, okay? Coming up with an idea that allows you to do what you love and then turn it around into a business in a month or less. Is it possible? I think it is. I've tried it 2 times now, and I'll talk to you about those. The first one was another book that I wrote about 2 years ago. I published it about 2 years ago, and actually it was actually about just what I'm talking to you guys about today. It was about entrepreneurial journalism and new ways of making money on the internet. So I had this idea for a book that I thought there was a real demand for, that people want to know. There are no jobs out there, so how can I make money in journalism in different, unusual ways? I collected all my ideas into a book. I interviewed people about it on Skype. Didn't cost me anything. I wrote it up in Microsoft Word and published it as a PDF. Didn't cost me anything. And I did it in just over a month. It took me about 6 weeks to make the book. Okay, then I put a website together. I did some articles on my blog about it and put it on sale in less than 6 weeks. And the total cost to me was probably about €15. And it did okay. It didn't do brilliantly. It didn't make me tens of thousands. I kind of thought that it might make lots of money, but it didn't. But it certainly covered its costs, and it made enough money for me to get by for the next kind of 3 or 4 months. So it kind of gave me a cushion, if you like, of money just by doing this book for free. I followed this up then last year with a video production business, which I admit has the worst name for a company ever. I thought it was a good idea when I started the company, but Video Foo, that's a stupid name. But the idea was that I had the camera equipment, I had the editing stuff, I can make films. So I set up a production company, if you like, a video production business to make money, to make films for charities, like documentaries for charities and publishers and NGOs and even other businesses as well. And that's kind of what I did for lots of last year. I made a documentary for the Green Alliance. I made films for the Times newspaper. I made, who else did I do? Other kind of, I did videos for startups as well and things like that. And this one, I said, I'm going to start up this whole company. I'm going to get the website up. I'm going to design the logo. I'm going to set everything up in less than 30 days. And it actually only took me 4 days to do this whole thing. So I had to buy the web domain, create a website on WordPress, make this logo, and then that was it. I was in business. And I said my aim was that I wanted the business to make £1,000, so that's maybe €1,500 a month, because I figured that's kind of what I needed to get by. And actually the first commission came through, and it was for £3,000, so it was twice as much. So straight off the bat, I was making twice as much as I actually needed, and it kind of built from there throughout the year. And that was something that I started in less than a week, and very cheaply as well. And I did it all working from home, didn't get an office, didn't do any of that sort of thing, just did it that way as well. And the other good thing about starting a small business is that it's also very quick to wrap up, to close the business if you need to. So it got to the end of last year, and I'd done all the things I'd wanted to do with the business. I had a few more clients I was finishing some work for, but actually I kind of had some other ideas that I wanted to start. So I thought I've done this business now, I've seen what it can do. And so that I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to fire anyone. I didn't need to file any kind of bankruptcy notices or anything. I just took the website down and it was kind of done. So you can actually start a business very quickly, and you can also wrap it up very quickly as well. There's another business or another magazine in the UK that a friend of mine set up called Not on the Wires. And they was a group of them, and they were an online magazine, and they covered lots of different news from that wasn't in the mainstream news. So they covered the Arab Spring in a different way to the mainstream media, and they had news from Brazil and things like that. They eventually got to a point last month where they just decided they'd taken it as far as they wanted it to go, and they had other projects they wanted to start. And so they just wrapped it up. They said, thank you very much for reading. They've kept the website there, but it hasn't cost them anything to close the business. They haven't had to fire anyone. They did, started it, did what they wanted to do, and then were able to kind of wrap it up nice and quickly too. So at this point, I'd like to take it over to you guys with a challenge for you, a micro-business challenge for you guys. I'll just see how much time we have. We haven't got long. We've maybe got about 10 minutes to do this. And I'm going to give you a challenge then, and just see if we can together as a group try and come up with a micro-business that would work, okay? So I'd like to introduce you to my friend Kate. She's on Twitter if you want to follow her as either Radio Kate or Space Kate. She's a journalist, and at the moment she's working for Audio Boo, the audio social web app or phone app. So in the week, Kate put this message on Twitter. Kate is really passionate about space travel, about astronomy. It's something she's really excited about. And she says, would anyone like to pay me to do awesome space outreach, journalism, adventure, etc.? Passion alone doesn't buy airline tickets, she says. Because what she wants to do is to travel to Florida and to Houston in Texas and to go to the kind of big space conventions and events. And actually what she eventually wants to do is to go into space, is what her dream is, basically, at some point to become a space tourist. But she wants to basically, for the meantime, join that kind of space community and travel to the big events and the big launches and the big conferences and kind of really pursue her passion for space, okay? And I replied and said, well, why get someone to pay you when you can create a business? Why not create a business that funds your passion for space travel? So what we're going to try and do now is taking everything that we've talked about in the last kind of half an hour or last hour and see, can we apply all those lessons and come up with a micro business that Kate can start in less than 30 days for less than £100 that will make enough money for her to fund her kind of what she wants to do. I think she probably needs maybe about 1,500 euros a month, I guess, would pay for all the plane tickets and things that she wants to do. She has another job, so she doesn't need to, support herself. She just needs the money to travel. So maybe about 1,500. Is that sort of 1,500 euros seems realistic? So the first thing we want to do then is we know what her passion is. The first thing we want to do is try and package that passion into something that can be sold. So to start that, the first thing we need to do is think about the market, okay, and what she's doing. So the first question is what she's doing niche? Does it talk to a very specific audience? I think that it probably passes that test. There's spaces as a particular niche, and there's probably lots of different smaller niches, different verticals inside that area as well. The second question then is about this audience, okay? Who specifically is she going to try and create a business for, okay? Does anyone have any ideas then? Or any rough ideas about inside the kind of space travel, astronomy, kind of area? Do you think can you think of any specific groups of people who she might be able to target? Any ideas? Just raise your hand if you have an idea and we'll bring the microphone over. Yeah, we've got a couple here.
Well, perhaps easy one, but like case for the pharma example that you mentioned before, all those working in the space industry who don't actually have any chance to travel and perhaps only read corporate news from the big space industry groups, but would like a much more personal look into experience of someone who goes to these events and provides a very personal view about that without perhaps even being I don't know, even university qualified, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that.
So it could be, well, people like Kate who are just passionate about space and maybe want to go into space. I don't think there's a magazine, for example, or a website for people who want to go into space, is there? For people who are enthusiastic, but yeah, as you say, aren't qualified, absolutely. Are there any other ideas? We've got, there's someone at the back. Have an idea?
Funziona.
See if I can,
Ok, pensavo a un ambiente universitario, cioè a dei dipartimenti che si occupano in particolare di ricerca su contesti spaziali e che possono anche essere interessati a delle piccole sperimentazioni. Non penso ad un'unica università, ma di solito le università, o almeno le migliori, ragionano in termini di rete. Quindi intercettare quella rete che sicuramente esiste già e capire se con queste, chiamiamole sotto-organizzazioni, no? Può essere interessante scambiarsi consigli e magari mettersi a disposizione.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So an academic market, I guess, yeah. So looking at universities and those sort of people who study all the sciences around space. Yes, one over here.
Children. So children's programs, schools, because they dream about going to space. So.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so kids. Yeah, a market for a product for children who are interested in space. Brilliant.
Hi. Maybe Kate should go to Richard Branson, who is planning a space trip, and propose herself to do the magazine as editor-in-chief, and then I think that the money will come.
So who would be the sort of market for that? Sorry, just. Oh yeah, okay. So people who want to take a space trip. Okay, excellent. So that's great. We came up with just a few ideas there of quite a variety of ideas. Whether it's just people who generally want to do the same thing as her and have that kind of excitement for space, the academic field, which has lots of kind of funding potential, and as does children as well. So that's really good. So we can pick one of those. It doesn't matter which one. Maybe we could take the first suggestion, the sort of the general kind of just people who are passionate about space. I think the one risk with that idea is that something may already exist. We'd have to do some market research. We don't have time for that today. But let's assume that there is no other kind of big, there's no other product that already kind of fills this space. So we've got our audience in mind, okay? And it's really important that you have an understanding of very specifically of who your market are, who your audience are. And that's not a different thing to journalism. That's what we do as journalists when we work on a newspaper. A newspaper usually knows a lot about their readers. They might know their age group. They might know, how much income, how much they earn, where they live, what sort of food they like or what sort of clothes they buy. Online, it's not so much on the internet. We don't necessarily have those sort of demographics about age and, gender, because actually people who are passionate about space might be, as Federica says, 10, and they might be 90 years old. So you can't really sort of do that demographically, but you can have that passion demographic, if you like, that kind of interest. So we know who our market are. The second question is that very important question about value. Okay, so asking, what can Kate do to help those people who are passionate about space, who want to find out more about it, who want to kind of really pursue their passion for space and going into space? What do they need that Kate can offer? Does anyone have any ideas on that one? That's the difficult question. Say again, sorry? Access. So she could use she does have contacts in the space industry. She could use that to kind of get access to the big kind of names in kind of space travel. But then you wonder what would be the value of that, perhaps. Are there any other ideas? This is the one that often takes the most kind of thought. So I mean, what you could do, for example. Just thinking on the top of my head, you could, what you can do, for example, is create a community of other people who are fascinated by space, because that's one thing that maybe they need. If you love space, you want to meet other people who love space and talk to them online and go to events and things. So there could be that kind of end to it. There could be maybe a way of taking all the complicated stuff about space travel, all the science, and then simplifying it into a really accessible way. So people who are fascinated by the universe but don't understand, the ins and outs of space travel it could be a learning experience for them to learn how to, how space travel works, if you like, and doing that sort of thing. This is the thing you have to think quite hard about. Let me see how we're doing for time. So I'd say maybe going for one of those two things. I think also just kind of offering inspiration, I think, is often a value to people. Letting people who maybe have given up on the dream of going into space could be something she offers as a way of saying, how can we all get there? And then kind of, providing inspiration and hope, if you like, for people who are really interested in it, at the same time as providing really interesting content about the space industry. Okay, so let's say we've decided that's how we're going to help people. The next thing we need to do is then package that somehow. And remember, a business can either be a product or a service. So you could offer one of those two things. A service would be a difficult one to do, maybe. Unless you can actually help people get into space, there's not much of a service. But she can package all that into a tangible product. So she could create a website that is the home for people who want to get into space, who are passionate about going into space. She could also package that into an actual magazine in the same way that some of the people we met earlier did, or a film even, and those sort of things. So that is kind of how you'd want to package it into a product that is distinct from you, okay? So it's not something that relies on her, it's something that she can then package and then make money from. So that's the fourth question. We know how to package this into a product. The next question is, how do we make money from this product? And so this is where we come into the question of revenue streams. The big question for sort of new entrepreneurs and people coming up with business ideas is, what is the best revenue stream? I can tell you that the best revenue stream for any kind of business is to have lots of them, okay? To have as many revenue streams as you possibly can. The worst one, I wouldn't say the worst, but the one you want to be the smallest is advertising, which might seem strange to journalists. That's obviously how newspapers make a lot of their money. But actually, advertising is very affected by the economy. And so if there's another recession, ad revenue goes down, you get less money. So by all means, have adverts. The good thing about space travel is that there's lots of kind of supplementary businesses in that area. You know, there's space tourism businesses, there's lots of toys, books, courses and things that you can sell, that you can advertise on your website. She could also offer subscription. That would be another popular, getting people to pay a small amount a month. And if you think about it, you wonder, how much would people pay to subscribe? You can also think about how much you need. I quite like the sort of 500 by 5 rule, which is if you can get 500 people to pay €5 a month to be subscribed to your magazine. Hang on, I have to be very embarrassing here and do the maths. Does anyone know what that is off the top of their head? €500. I knew this earlier. 500 times 5. There you go. €2,500. Oh yeah, that's really obvious. Sorry, I should have known that. 5,000 times 5 is €2,500 a month. Okay, just by subscription. There's a famous story about a guy in America. He died about 2 years ago at a grand old age of about 80. He ran for his whole life. He ran something called the Ferrari Market Newsletter, and it was just a monthly newsletter. It used to just be on paper, and on it just listed the name and the model and the location and the value of every Ferrari that has ever been made in Ferrari's history. And if you are in the market to buy or sell a Ferrari, you needed to be subscribed to this newsletter because it had all that really important information about selling and buying a thing. And it only had, I think, 60,000 subscribers at the time that he died, only about 60,000. But they each paid $100 a year, I think, which brought him in $600,000 a year just by doing a weekly or a monthly newsletter. That's all he had to do, and he was making $600,000 a year. So do think about that as well. You need fewer than you think. You need less, kind of followers and subscribers than you think. So they're the kind of main ways to do it with the actual product itself. So selling a product, doing a subscription service, doing advertising. But also don't forget the other things as well, like doing events is a very popular way. We're seeing lots of newspapers, as we saw, and companies that run training events that people will pay, €100 to come along to a day-long workshop. And if you think you can maybe create workshops for people who want to go into space, or events that can bring them together with really amazing speakers and things like that, you can make lots of money that way as well. And also don't forget other kind of products as well. There are lots of people who do really well by selling T-shirts, for example, or books, or DVDs, things like that. Again, really easy actually to set up online. You just need to create an online store, and often all the kind of delivery and things can be handled separately, a bit like Amazon, if you like. So there's lots of ways, lots of different revenue streams. That's just a few of them. But the more you delve in, the more you realize there are lots of different ways to take your package that you've made and to monetize it. And then the final challenge then is the €100 30-day bit. So what she'd have to do if she's going to if we're going to agree that she's going to start a magazine or an online website for all these people, that's pretty easy to do for less than €100, isn't it? She can buy a domain name, which is €10. Maybe she needs the space, the web space. That's normally about €100 a year, or less than that, maybe about €60 a year. And then everything else you can do through WordPress, pretty much. A WordPress theme that's free will make the website look good. And she can do that easily in kind of 30 days as well. So you can see she could actually start. We've got the kind of bare bones there of a micro business that could potentially fund Kate's passion for traveling around the world, talking about space and things like that. So there's lots of things, lots of questions we need to answer, and we need to look at the market a bit more closely and kind of see what the competition is and things like that. But it's clear that there is an audience there who would want what she could offer. And hopefully that's kind of giving you an idea of just the simple questions that you need to answer in order to start a micro business. So if you did want to write them down, it's about finding a niche, so having a very specific area you're publishing in, having a very specific market inside that, so knowing exactly who your audience are, understanding how you're going to help them, what the value is, then how you package that into a product or a service, and then the revenue streams. What are the different ways you can make revenue off those different packages? Okay, so to wrap up then, what does it take then to be an entrepreneur? What do you need? Because there are lots of things that people think are essential, like these. Do you need an MBA from Harvard to know how to be an entrepreneur? Do you need experience in accounting and business? Do you need venture capital or something to get started, or a business plan and cost flow analysis? No, I don't think you need any of those things. And in fact, these things are often quite dangerous to the beginning entrepreneur because they kind of provide an excuse to not get started. You know, you can spend months, writing a business plan, and it's just an excuse not to actually start the damn business. You can, go and spend lots of money to go and get a business qualification. Again, that's probably just delaying doing the big jump. And actually, everything else you kind of learn on the way. I think there are just two things that you need to convert your passions in journalism and what you do into a successful business. And they are courage and commitment. Those are two words that are easy to kind of gloss over, so I want to talk about them both a little bit more. Courage, people often think of as being fearless, having no fear, being able to say, I'm going to start this business and I'm not scared if it doesn't work. There's actually no such thing as people who don't have fear. Like if you actually don't feel fear, you have a pathological condition, I think. So courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing it anyway. That is what courage is waking up, shitting yourself about what you're about to do, but getting out of bed and starting the business and just doing it. Even though you feel ill in your stomach from you're so scared about what's going to happen, you think people are going to laugh at you or your idea is going to go straight down. It may well do. But it's not about having an idea that is guaranteed not to fail, because there's no such thing. There's no amazing business model or idea that is guaranteed to succeed. It doesn't exist. Part of it is about having that courage and making that move to say, I don't know for certain if it's going to work, but I am prepared to do it anyway. And the second thing is really important, and that's commitment. You can't underestimate actually how important commitment is to making this work, because giving birth to a new idea, taking an idea for a business that's just in your head and turning it into something that's real, that exists, that has a name and that people actually give you money for, it's really, really difficult. I'm not going to lie, being entrepreneurial and doing all this is really, really hard. And it will go wrong lots of times. People will pull out, or no one will buy it. Your first idea won't work. You'll get into trouble. You've accidentally used someone else's name, and you're threatened with lawsuits. All those things are probably going to happen. So it's about having that commitment to just keep on going at it, and to work the long days without promise of rewards that it takes. Sort of getting up at 6 and not finishing until 6 and things like that. That's sort of demonstrating that commitment. If you have both of those things, if you can get up every day, shitting yourself, but doing it anyway, and then not stopping until it's done, there really is actually no reason you won't succeed at all. Now, that said, is entrepreneurship for everyone? No, it isn't. It's not. There are some people who are made to do it, I suppose you could say. Some people who are willing to take those risks, who are willing to act in spite of that fear. And then there are people who aren't, and that's absolutely fine. So if you've come to this and you've heard the whole talk and you're thinking, nah, this doesn't seem right for me, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to be entrepreneurial. There are still enough jobs out there. But for those of you who this does maybe excite you a little bit, maybe you've kind of thought, oh, I could do that, or you've thought maybe it's a bit easier than you thought, or maybe just you have an idea and you're really excited about doing it and you think maybe you could possibly do it. I would really encourage you to think about doing it and to take those first steps, to try a micro business and try and turn it around in 30 days. Because the brilliant thing about doing it in 30 days is that if it fails, you've only lost 30 days and 100 euros at most. So it's a lot easier to fail. And the other thing I would say as well is that if you do feel this might be for you, if this does excite you, then journalism right now really needs people like you. It really needs people who are going to take these risks, who are going to try these new ideas, who are going to create these new products. That is the kind of the one of the big keys to the future of journalism, I think. It isn't about these new little businesses replacing the mainstream media. It's not about all the big newspapers going bust and just being little websites instead. I think it's about a vibrant ecosystem where you've got the big tall trees of, the BBC or CNN and the big papers, but then they're sort of supplemented by these kind of smaller plants, these sort of grassroots, smaller businesses that create a much more vibrant ecosystem at the same time. So, with that said, if this is for you, where do you start? My advice is to start with that piece of paper that you wrote on right at the start and you put in your pocket, because that is the kind of first step to knowing what you're most excited about, what your passion is. Start there and see if you can kind of make a micro business out of it. And I think I've got a bit of time for questions, but that's everything from me. Grazie. Do we have time for questions, or I don't know if anyone has any?
No, solo una domanda pratica. Queste slide sono a disposizione sul tuo sito? Sì? Possiamo trovarle sul tuo sito tranquillamente, queste slide?
Yes, absolutely. I can put them on. I'll put them on SlideShare, and then if you go to, I didn't give you the web address for my blog, but I can give that to you now. It's just adamwestbrook.wordpress.com, and I'll make them available on there. And I write a lot about entrepreneurship and stuff on there, so do have a read.
Hi. First of all, thanks a lot for this. It was all very inspirational and motivational, and therefore very, very useful, especially because we focused on starting small, which is the key. Sometimes people think too big too soon, and that's the big danger. Recall the slide where you mentioned the start. What do I need? Money, office, people, and then you said we don't need any of that, actually. In my experience in the last 2 years, has been trying to start projects, etc. Definitely not money, definitely not an office, but quite often, especially in this field, you often need collaborators, and then it's where the key is for the success, because you need to find people. Perhaps not many, just one or two who have exactly the skills perhaps you don't have, or fill the gaps in your idea, and that's the greatest difficulty I always found, to find someone who has exactly the same motivation, and then has exactly the same sometimes acceptance of risks, of course, of waking up in the morning and still doing the job even when it doesn't seem perhaps the best time to do it, etc., etc. So, don't know if you want to comment on that, on how you perhaps choose your collaborators. And
yeah. Well, the first thing to say is that's a very important point, actually. That absolutely, although I guess I'd say, you don't want to maybe dive straight into hiring, having employees and all the kind of legal hurdles that brings. I absolutely agree with you that collaborators, having people who work with you and, as you say, share your passion, but also have the skills that you don't, is really important. In terms of, finding the right collaborators, that is a very important thing. If I'm honest, it's actually not something I've been hugely successful at in the past. I think it's very difficult. There's lots of kind of false starts here and there. I think what you're looking for are, it's hard. I think you have to be very open at the start when you start working with people. What do you want to get out of this? Do we have the same goals? Do we have the same ideas? Or are you doing it because you want, to gain a skill or something, or because you want to be involved in something, and the motivations are different? I think that's a very important thing. I'm trying to remember what because there's actually in the book I mentioned at the start, there's actually someone wrote a page about tips for being a good collaborator. I'm trying to remember what the other ones were, but I think you have to. I don't know. I think it's sometimes it's trial and error. So I think maybe you approach it in the same way that you approach starting a business as well. So you meet people, you start working with them really quickly. And for 2 weeks, and just see how you get on, and then you'll know very quickly after that whether you are, ready to whether you're going to work together in more difficult circumstances, I suppose. And the other thing as well is always to regularly check in with that other person or your other collaborators, and check that they're okay, and sort of pick up problems that come up early on. I've collaborated with people who were really excited about the project we were working on, but then ended up being offered a job at the BBC or something, and said, I can't do this anymore. So you need to be able to pick up on that very early as well. And you're right, knowing that they also are as passionate about doing the independent entrepreneurial thing as you are, and aren't sort of waiting for the next job to come on. But it is difficult. I haven't been hugely successful in it myself, so it's just keep trying, I suppose. Good, I'm not the only one.
Volevo chiederti, tu hai parlato soprattutto di passione, no? Nei confronti, nell'affrontare una microattività. Secondo te, sempre rimanendo in tempi stretti, no? Tu hai parlato di 30 giorni, magari parliamo di 60 giorni, si potrebbe iniziare una microattività non da una passione, ma dopo una breve ricerca di mercato su un'attività o su un prodotto in cui uno sente un vuoto? Ci stiamo con i tempi, secondo te? È possibile?
I think the reason I say 30 days, I guess the benefit of the 30 days is it forces you to basically to fail fast is what a lot of people describe it as. So getting the idea turned around quickly, so as soon as possible whether it's going to work or not. That's the kind of benefit. So it enables you to sort of just get something done, get it out there, and you'll know straight away whether people want it or not. And you can absolutely extend that to 60 days or maybe even a year, but the risk is the longer you spend on it, the longer you go without really knowing for certain whether it's going to work or not. So, what you could do is do a bit of both, and, you have an idea, turn it into something as quickly as you possibly can and get it to the public, even if it's a sort of beta version or a demo version, just so you know whether or not people are going to buy it or not. And then you can then go in, take some time off doing more in-depth research and market research and things like that to find out more about the idea, I suppose. I think, market research is important, and you shouldn't skim over those things, but at the same time, you shouldn't let those things, or the preparation, just become an excuse not to start. The most important thing is to start a business, or, turn the idea into something real as quickly as possible. Because once it's real, it's a lot easier to kind of move on from there.
How much time do you suggest to wait until your publishing activity or your job, your startup, your work makes revenues? How much time do you know? Because people have to live,
absolutely. Well, one of the benefits of the micro business approach is that it's something that you can do in your spare time. So you can start these businesses and have another job at the same time and sort of build it up until it comes to a point where it's making enough money. That's often a safer, I guess, less risk risky way of starting a business. And I think actually some of the people on here who we looked at, they had started it working in the evenings and in weekends and things like that until it got to a point where it could sustain them. It's difficult to know how long you should wait though, because there are obviously some businesses that can go years before anyone seems to pay any money for them. I think you have to be looking at, I mean, all the revenue streams that I sort of mentioned before, like advertising and sponsorship, I mean, they're all kind of reliant on building an audience. It doesn't have to be a big audience, but it needs to be a specific, passionate, engaged audience. And I think, what you just want to be doing is, and again, having this kind of fast turnaround mentality is, if you find you've been doing it for 2 months and it hasn't brought any money yet, try and change it up and say, okay, well, how else can I monetize this audience I have? I haven't tried hosting an event yet. How about I try hosting an event and see if anyone will pay? And then maybe that doesn't work, and so you say, right, okay, maybe I should try and create a one-off edition of this magazine and get it sponsored by a big company in the field or something like that, or do a publishing partnership or something like that. So you've got to kind of be always quickly. People in like Silicon Valley and all those sort of entrepreneurial types sort of talk about iterating a lot. So you create something, you test it to see whether it works, and then you just tweak little bits here and there and just sort of work out what's not working, and then change it and just see if it does work. And just keep doing little changes until it starts to sort of, starts to work. Again, you have to make that decision, I suppose. You can do it to a certain point, but if it's not going to work, it's not going to bring in the money, then, you have to ask the questions about why and whether you should try something else. Any last questions? Great. Okay, thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you go and start your own businesses. Thanks.